I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought at night just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Let's do it.
Hello,
Hi.
and welcome to Season 33, Episode 15 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy,
I'm Emily.
and in today's episode, our topic is playing RPGs with an intent to explore or discover things about yourself. And then we have emails. We've got one from Ellie that talks about player responsibility and player dynamics, and Gergmerg shares some experience with player feedback. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. You can also go to the mailbag channel in the Discord if you're there and just drop some topics or comments in there, and we pull them from there as well now. Announcements. Our next game days is May 18th. So go ahead and go to happyjacks.org/Discord and you can start signing up. You can start running games. It's very exciting. So yeah, we are already planning for May, friends. Already. It's already here if you're in the Discord.
You ever just think about how May is like 6 weeks away?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Indie Designer of the Month. This month, it is Logan Timms, he, him, and he's a trans queer designer at Breathing Stories. You can find Breathing Stories at breathingstories.itch.io, tumblr.com/breathing-stories, or at ink_and_stories on Twitter. I won't call it X, it's Twitter. Babbling Stream is a game of... this week we're talking about Babbling Stream. It's a game of communication between people that share a very... Everything's fine. It's fine.
We're doing great.
Doing great.
Yeah.
Babbling Stories is a game of communication between people that share very few known words. Usually, using only 10 pictographs, you're basically using the numbered Uno cards. Two people... groups will try and communicate important cultural needs. It may be tricky, it may be frustrating, but by the game's end, you will have told a story of what happens when we really try to talk to each other. To play, you need a deck of Uno cards, pencil and paper, and then 2 to 4 players. And you can find this game, Babbling Stream, for $5 on breathingstories.itch.io.
I think I might be the only person in the world who doesn't own an Uno deck.
Really?
Yeah, it feels like a thing that people just have, and I don't.
I don't know if I haven't actually know that you mentioned it. Like, I kind of assumed I did.
Yeah.
But I know I did it as a kid. We had a bunch of them. I don't know if I have one now, though.
I have a very full board game closet, and I assume it's spontaneously generated in Uno deck at some point.
Probably.
So, yeah.
Huh. Now I have to go look and see. I might have to go buy one, because that's kind of an interesting mechanic to use, like an Uno deck specifically. I hadn't thought about that.
I love anytime people use a mechanic other than dice.
Yes.
Like, one of my probably my favorite game of all time, The Quiet Year, uses playing cards. So, which is, I really appreciate. And I think that, that evolved into like For the Queen, which uses a card deck as well. Anyway.
And Decima.
And Decima.
Yeah, because A Quiet Year is 100% a very big, like, touchstone inspiration for it. All right, so our topic this week was actually just generated a minute ago while we were talking. And both Emily and I play RPGs with the intent often to explore things about ourselves, which might be a little uncomfortable to talk about, but it'll be fun.
We're going to be great.
It'll be great. It'll be great. So that's one of the things we're going to kind of touch on tonight is a lot of times people play RPGs, I think, to have adventures, to do kind of, like project yourself into hero narratives and things like that. I do think there's also a large portion of us who are like, what's something I want to like discover? Maybe unconsciously sometimes, but I know I do it very consciously. So do you.
Yes.
So I think that's something that's interesting to kind of talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a trans person, so when I was on the start of my gender journey, I did a lot of tabletop role playing to like, what if I played a girl? What would happen then? And it was really great. But I was in a game of the RPG Die, DIE, which is based on the comic of the same name, which was really wonderful. An online playtest of that. And I went into that being like, this is the transest game ever made. I'm not going to spoil what happens in that, but if you read the comic, you almost certainly know what happens in that game. But basically, the idea was like I was going to explore trans stuff. But I did this like little throwaway thing in the like lead up to it of like, and you know what? I think maybe this character is like thinking about having a kid or whatever. And the GM like zeroed in on that and was like, yes, you can do your trans thing, but also I'm going to give you a 9-year-old orphan girl who follows you around and is like, thinks of you as her mom. And I was like, why is this so interesting? Anyway, now I have a child. And like, it's not directly a result of that, but my wife and I had been in a space of, we'd always assumed we were going to have kids. We had never had kids. And it was like going to take medical intervention to have kids or adoption. And we were at a space where we were like, maybe we don't need to do this. And then I was in that game and like somewhere in there, I was like, I think maybe we should try again. And now there's a baby that lives in my house and is walking everywhere now. And that was a bad idea. I don't know why we taught her how to do that, but
Yeah. Oh, once that starts, there's like zero containing it.
yeah. Yeah.
And then they start running. They're running. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was like, for me, that was such an important thing. And like, if you've seen me play in a game here, you know that what I tend to do is I tend to like build from like small character conflicts up. So I'm like, there was a game I played in last year, The World Ends Thursday, which was like, I want to think about how people survive having broken family dynamics with their families of origin and how they can then have successful families they raise themselves. And Bastion was my son in that game. And like, that was like such an interesting way for me to look at that, but also like it was a crazy, funny, riff on CW shows. And like, so like, I'm always like looking for a thing that I want to think about within my own life. And then like trying to like shoehorn that into an RPG framework. And like, I'm used to that because like I'm a writer, but yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually sharing in every other week I have a tabletop designer meetup with people online, and one of the questions a couple weeks ago was like, what's like something you realized about yourself through role-playing games. And I was one of the first people to go, and everyone got mad because like one of those things similar to you is like I realized that I wanted to have a kid. And it wasn't like I hadn't wanted a kid before. Like I'd always kind of known I like kids. I'm a teacher. I like kids. I've always wanted a kid. But it was like one of the things where it's like, maybe now's the time for it. Maybe we need to start having the conversation of like in the next, small amount of time. And it was a game I was playing, and like sort of similar to you, there was like a kid that I ended up like very big feelings for, and like very like wanting to dive into that storyline a lot. And I was like a little bit of a driving, home, and I was like, okay. So, honey, I know we've kind of talked about this before, but let's talk about this now. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I think there is, and like you were talking about, like your journey as a trans person, and that's something that a lot of people, both in the Happy Jacks like hosts playing community and the Discord community, have like talked about. It's very interesting. Like we've had our community now for like 14 years, seeing people who've come to realizations about themselves, and like it's a safe place to kind of explore that,
right.
and really, try and kind of dip your toe in the water. Well, what is it like to have a kid for 4 hours every other week who's imaginary, and I can go away from, do I like this? Okay, I do like this. So maybe we'll start like, yeah. I mean, like it's a little bit of a jump from that to like chasing them around the house to now. We had our first emergency room visit this last week, thanks to the running and a coffee table. They're fine. Everything's fine. But it's, it's a big jump.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think like when I started playing RPGs, I was already like actively questioning things around my gender and sexuality and all of that. But like it was a thing where the very first time I played any RPG period was at, I think, OrcCon. I don't remember which con is which, but it was President's Day weekend 2000. I want to say 2011. It was shortly after the Community Dungeons and Dragons episode had aired. So like that gives you a sense of where my priorities lie. And I went in with this rule of like, I'm not going to play a girl all the time. Because in the back of my brain, I was like, that's going to feel too good. But I was in a game of, it was a hack of Lady Blackbird about, basically it was based on like a Japanese anime magic girl stuff. What Sailor Moon, there we go. That was what I was trying to think of. And it was like it was all pre-gen characters, so it was all teen girls, and they had like, I got picked up this type A like Tracy Flick, but she's also in the Sailor Moon, and I was like, why does this come so easily to me? But no, like I'm one other thing I think about a lot is because I'm trans, I didn't get to have the normal, I think, adolescence experience of figuring out your sexuality in like a body that makes sense to you. And now I'm married and have a child. So like, it's also hard to do that right now. So like RPGs are a space to be like, what are the things I missed? What are the experiences I didn't get to have because I was, so locked down and so traumatized. And anyway, I'm fun to play games with.
You are 100% are. But I think I think people like are sometimes like a little bit shy about doing things like that. And there's like the trope of like, well, don't use RPGs as therapy. But and I agree with that. But I do think that it can be very therapeutic without being therapy.
Yeah.
There's a distinction there. Like if like where you can go through things, you can normalize things, you can experiment and try new things, and in a healthy, safe environment, which is great. Like that's what everyone should do when they're trying new things like that.
Yeah.
Without it being like your substitute for treatment.
Yeah.
If you actually need real therapy, which everyone should be getting therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy's great.
I have a couple friends who there's a therapist in Utah somewhere. I think Salt Lake City. I don't know other cities in Utah, so I apologize to Utah. But they are work with a lot of queer people, and every week have like a D&D session.
Yeah.
Basically is like group therapy, but like we're gonna like also fight monsters and like talk about our feelings.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is, the important like line between this and therapy is that when you go into therapy, you have the intent of talking about yourself and working on yourself and all of this that is shared with one other person. And when you're playing in a game, like when I played in that game, I was not anticipating that I was going to confront whether I wanted to have a child or not. It is like leaving an open space for a part of yourself that you maybe haven't considered yet, whether that's your gender or like, whether that's like, am I actually a fan of the California Angels? Like if you want, like it is going in and only you need to know what you're looking at. It is going in with the openness to looking at pieces of yourself that you maybe haven't before, which again, like I'm a writer, so I'm so used to doing that. But I think I find just going in and playing a hero very boring. I want to play a hero who has personal problems.
Exactly.
So.
Well, like overcoming the challenges of yourself to be a hero. That's the part I love. I joke a lot about like how I end up playing myself in RPGs a lot. And sometimes it's nice to do that in a way that it's like successful all the time. Because like, I don't know. I think there's an element of yourself in every character you play.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice to be yourself and have things go well and have you overcome obstacles and have, your relationships go well. And sometimes it's great to not have that, to have the opposite, where you have these messy relationships that you might not have, the freedom or courage to have in real life. I don't know. It would be great to like I play like fighters a lot, and it's like great to play someone who just says what they think all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's super nice. And, you have a group of people at the table. Then you can just be like, that is the most ridiculous thing. Why would you say that out loud? When I might think that sometimes in real life. I have a little sign that's like, people often mistake my wows for compliments. It's like, wow, But like, there's just a little bit of freedom at the table for you to experiment with what you wish you could do in real life.
I've been thinking, like, my day job is I write on a television show. So I'm in a space where I have to, like, be on a lot because it's 4 hours a day that I'm sitting there and talking about ideas with my colleagues. It's the best job in the world. But I get to the end of it and I am just totally drained.
Yeah.
And I've always, like, defined myself as an extrovert. But now I'm like, am I actually just, like, a really extroverted introvert? Is that, like, actually what's going on here? And I just started up a new campaign with some friends online because I have a kid, so I can only online game now, apparently. That is where I was like, I always play like high charisma characters who like are very talkative, and I'm like, I'm gonna play deliberately someone who's a little bit off-putting, and she's very happy to just like live in her little hut with her husband and child and like not necessarily get drawn into the big adventure. And like, because I wanted to sort of like explore, am I introverted? So like, I think when we talk about this, we often think about exploring huge questions, but like that is like, if I'm introverted or extroverted, has very low stakes for my life, but it is like a thing I'm curious about.
For Vault 818, like ages ago, I'd always play, I mean, I do still, but like, I'd always played like the type A kind of like problem solver character. And I very specifically for that was like, no, I'm going to play like the low intelligence, like kind of like easily fooled, like just like, Shimbo, because she was like massive and just like, and it was so fun and it was so nice. And I got to be like, I wasn't the weirdest one in that game because Samantha was playing in that game. So there's like, but if I'd been at any other table, I would have been the weirdest one at the game. But, and it was just such a nice, like, departure from, like, being the teacher, being the Happy Jacks wrangler, being, I wasn't a mom at the time, but, like, it's so nice sometimes to break away from that too and recognize for this campaign, I'm going to be the part of me that doesn't want any responsibility, doesn't want to worry about anyone's feelings. That just, but I think like I made that as like a very specific choice at the beginning. I'm like, I'm going to be different than all the other campaigns. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like if you are contemplating how you could incorporate this into your own play life, like that's a good place to start. Do you always play the big, strong character? Maybe you play the character who kind of has to like get by through their wits or through talking really fast or whatever. I think it's like, it's a little bit like you when you think about, giving yourself the D&D stats, like what would your stats be? Like, it's a little bit like that. It's a little bit just, okay, I'm going to turn up the dial in a different way this time and see what that gets me. And I think one-shots are also a really great way to do that, because then if you don't like the character, you've only had to play it one time.
Yeah. That's a great way to kind of just start like dabbling.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of kind of like space on what I was about to say. Sorry, I need more caffeine. But I think there's a lot of ways to also, I think it's really important to try different types of settings and systems with this too. I really dislike like zombie horror, which I've kind of always known, but it's like, it's not something I really like confronted. I've kind of just avoided things with it, which is generally fairly easy because most of it's like movies and TV shows. But like when we played in a zombie game, I forget what the name of it was, but it's on the AP feed. I'll remember it later tonight when it doesn't matter and nobody's listening. But that was like one of the first times I was like, oh no, I really don't like this.
Yeah.
Like I really don't like this at all. Like, and it was a fun campaign and I loved everybody at the table. So it was like, I was able to get through it, but that was like Well, and that is the book closing on all zombie stuff for Kimmy forever. Yeah. And it's just like, so it's interesting sometimes too, you find things that you kind of didn't like, but like, no, you really don't like them too.
Yeah. And it's worthwhile to know that about yourself too. If you don't like a thing, like that's good. Like it's good to know why. It's good to know the depths of that. It's good to know like, and this is always, I mean, I think if you have a good group and you have a good safety mechanics, RPGs are a wonderful way to explore that. The important thing is if you start doing this, you will end up with a different gender and you will have a child. Like that's inevitable. All of it.
All right. Oh, that was fun. I think it's so interesting, like the both of us with the kid thing. That's I wonder, like I've kind of always just assumed that was like a very unique thing, and I wonder if that's like, oh, Dead Rain. Yes, thank you, James. That's Dead Rain was the name of the system and that AP.
Thank you, James.
Yes, thank you, James. On the ball with all the research and the information. I wonder, like, I'd love to just know, like, how many people out there have kids because of an RPG.
If you have a similar experience, please email us at the show that is on the front page that I've forgotten. QCG Aaron asks, how long do you have before you switch genders and have a child? You never know.
Yeah, it depends.
It could happen tomorrow.
Yeah, just wake up, totally different. I mean, it took me like over a decade. So
yeah, I was definitely like I started playing in 2011 and transitioned in the late 2010s and had a kid in 2022. So I had you got a decade. You got a decade.
You're fine. Obviously we're kidding. Whatever you like. It varies. So different things and
life is a wonderful panoply of options. It's a giant buffet, and you should try as many as you can. And this is a safe way to try a number of them.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it really is. It's a great way to just take like a bunch of little bites of different lifestyles and different things, and again, bringing it back to kids, we always try one bite.
Try one bite.
Try one bite. If you don't like the rest of it, that's okay. Thank you for trying.
Yeah.
So you might end up liking broccoli.
You might.
Or you might end up with a kid and you have to pretend like you like broccoli because you want your kid to like broccoli. And that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. I like broccoli now.
And
I have gaslit myself into liking broccoli. Because I have a kid and I'm like,
so good. That's when I use my role-playing skills in real life. So yummy. So yummy. Broccoli's good for you. You should eat it. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. Mailbag number 1. Do you want to read the first one and I'll read the second one?
Sounds good. Okay. Hello, Happy Jackers. Ellie here. Another great conversation on the Discord brought up a question that I've seen actively avoided in TTRPG spaces. The responsibilities of players at the table to avoid all that stuff that gets brought up in GM advice threads. As someone who loves to both play and GM, but playing is my first love, I get increasingly frustrated by seeing the conversation about managing player behavior be dominated by telling GMs what they should do about it. Yeah, managing your table at that social level is an essential GM skill and responsibility, but GMs shouldn't be bearing the whole burden. When I see questions like, how do I convince my player to fulfill a basic part of the social contract, like having motivation to play, showing up to the game, and treating other players with respect, I remember the single best advice I ever got as a player at a panel at PAX Unplugged, during which the question of how do GMs make cool moments for their players came up. And B. Dave Walters, who might be familiar to many as an experienced professional GM and AP performer, said, I'm paraphrasing here, that yes, it's the GM's responsibility to create cool moments for their player, but it's also the player's responsibility to create cool moments for each other. That advice stuck with me hard, and as a sidebar, when I had the privilege of being players together with B. Dave a few months later, he 100% practiced what he preached and was an S-tier tablemate. A player who is routinely negative toward others, reluctant to play the scenario, and so on, isn't living up to that responsibility of creating cool moments for the others. But in the past, when I've tried to bring up the player responsibilities conversation, either on other Discord servers or Reddit, or other places that serve as GM advice councils? Well, one memorable time I was actively piled on by multiple users to stop talking about it. The conversation of player responsibility has turned out to be one a lot of people find uncomfortable, and it is because it forces us to examine our behavior and what we want and expect from a game, but that doesn't make the conversation any less important. I'm struggling to phrase this as a question rather than just an anecdote, but here goes. What do you see as the standard responsibilities of players? I'm talking about that mundane stuff, not that RPG horror story stuff that everybody already agrees is bad. And what are some ways as players to be on the lookout for managing our own behavior at the table to avoid falling into the kinds of situations that burden the GM with the dreaded OOC chat? Keep on keeping on. Ellie, thank you for the question, Ellie.
Yeah. I think it's something that people, like, I'll get to advice in a second, but I think people react bigly. It's fine. I have words tonight. People really react to this because a lot of people don't have a lot of choice in who they play with. So once you start confronting, is this a good player? Is this, like for just like mundane behavior? Like once you get into horror story territory, obviously it's like, this is not a good player. But it's like having those uncomfortable conversations about things that don't seem like deal breakers, then it starts being hard for people, especially if they only have one play group.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people sometimes get defensive about it and hope that the GM can fix their problems, even if it's not necessarily 100% the GM's responsibility. And that you're absolutely right. The players absolutely have their part in the contract at a table.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like what often happens is in this situation, what is essentially a structural issue, which is I live in this place, I have access to these people, or I'm in this Discord server, I have access to these people, gets turned into the whole problem, as opposed to like, I also share the responsibility of like my sort of governing my own behavior in this regard. And like, I realize we're talking about stuff that is not the absolute horror story. We're talking about like, this person doesn't show up on time, or, this person is just like only engaged in their character and struggling to like deal with other characters. But I think it's like, I do think that players within this story itself sort of have to, I think you have to like create a shared community within the story. Like it, obviously you're like players as a community, but I think that like one of the most important and meaningful things about I think Powered by the Apocalypse games, which is filtered out to everywhere, is like, and Decima, why I always use that is it automatically gives you like, these people have these connections, even if they don't realize it. And that creates a scenario where like you are responsible for each other's well-being in a way that like the GM can play with, but doesn't necessarily have to. And you are like building it up. But I also tend to like, the people I play with, I've been playing with for a long time. So I'm rarely in a situation where I'm like trying to feel that out. So this is like a tricky one to respond to, but I do think it is a conversation worth having, as opposed to just like shutting it down and saying the GM is responsible for everything, which I think is what often happens.
Yeah, no, it does. And a lot of times, like, I think I feel for it as a teacher, because it's like, yes, like students arrive to my classroom and they have their own responsibilities. They're 9 and 10, so it's a little bit iffy with that. But and sometimes it's like, it's the same thing where I like in a classroom where I'm trying to judge, okay, is this a bad actor, or do they just not really realize?
Sure.
So, it's like if you have a player who is very self-centered with like the storylines that they really engage in, like, is that like, yes, that's not a good thing. You don't want that to happen. But it's hard to, like, they may not be a bad actor. They, one, may not be realizing that. Two, I mean, not every player at every table is like a big performer or knows how to engage with things like that.
Yeah.
So there's also a little bit of like understanding / tolerating that has to happen.
Yeah.
In ways that that it's easier often to just be like, as a GM, like we get questions all the time from GMs who are trying to solve these problems, and like honestly, some of them you can't really solve. It's hard to teach someone like social interaction in a pretend world.
Yeah.
And some people just step into that and can get it, and some people can't.
One thing I think is like, I've tried to do my last few times I've been a player as opposed to a GM is like, I look at every character, especially in the early going, and I'm like, what's the thing I'm curious about this person? What's the thing I think is cool about this person? What's the thing I think is fascinating about this person? And then like when I go into play, I am playing, we say play to find out. I am playing to find out those things about them in addition to the things about myself. And like, that helps me feel more integrated. And the game that I was talking about earlier, where I'm playing a real introvert, I am by necessity like kind of cut off from everybody, but I'm like still fascinated by all their characters. So I, Emily, want to know this stuff, and my character maybe doesn't care or already knows, but like I want to find that out. So that hopefully facilitates opportunities for others to play as well. And then hopefully that will incorporate my character who doesn't want to be incorporated.
Yeah. I think kind of like looking at like the part of the question where it's like, what do you see as the players thing? I like how you use the word facilitate, because that is the GM's job, to facilitate. I think the number one most important thing for players is to show up and ready to be facilitated. I think of like con games I run all the time. I ran a bunch at OrcCon recently, and like one of them was a table with so many, it was like 8 people. It was my fault for like, yeah, late night game, it'll be fun, off the books, it'll be great. It was wild, and it was like very like having to be very careful about, okay, you've had a spotlight, like passing the spotlight around. It only worked because the people in that room were ready to be facilitated, and they knew that they were a big group, and they were like, as when I moved the spotlight to someone else, they let it go. And that I think is the number one most important thing for a player to realize is like, okay, when the GM points the spotlight at you, either accept it or be like, I'm not ready, and then like let them move it to someone else. Or when they're moving it away from you, when you've had it for a while, let that happen too. Like, let that happen, help it happen, like pass it off. Because I think that's the hardest thing, I think, sometimes to, as a GM, to get players to do and to realize, and for players to teach them that mindset.
Yeah. I think about a lot in writing, especially for television, but where you have multiple characters bouncing around, is like a story is only as good as its weakest character in a lot of ways. And I think that's especially true at the table, where you might be like getting a lot out of like, I'm doing this thing and my character's getting a lot to do, but there's like somebody else who isn't really involved. But like 2-3 sessions in, you're going to start to feel like the burnout of like everything's about you and nothing is about this person. And I think like it is important to always remember that like the story you're telling as a group is all of you, and it's only going to be as good as everybody there is good. And the GM can facilitate that to some extent, but it's on the players to take care of each other and to share that story burden, and to be like, you know what, I've had a lot of focus. Why don't we talk about Tim for a while? Is the hardest thing to do, but sometimes really necessary. And like, I think as a player, sometimes it's good to think like a GM, just like it's good for a GM to think like a player.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just being like, well, they're quiet, so they must not want the spotlight. If they don't want the spotlight, they can say that, like let them have that communication. But if just because they're quiet doesn't mean, like, they might be quietly waiting their turn, hopefully.
Yeah.
So don't just assume because they're not grabbing the spotlight that they don't want it, because they absolutely probably do.
Yeah.
They just are a very different way of doing it than, those of us who are extroverts.
And I think it's always like easy. Excuse me. I'm an extroverted introvert.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's. I think,
big same, but yeah.
I think the question you can always ask is, how does your character feel about what's happening? You know, that's like inevitably going to get an answer, even if it's just like, well, she's not all that into it, and you'd be like, okay, cool. I think, but also there's just like the courtesy stuff of showing up on time, and
Yeah.
all of that is like, that is just ultimately a player responsibility that a GM can't manage for. But I think we're sort of talking beyond that. But yes,
Yeah.
show up on time.
Yeah.
She's dead to herself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like all of that doesn't need to be said. Like,
Yeah.
show up. Like, don't bail on your friends. Like, all those things. But, like, yeah, I think as far as, like behavior at the table, like, I can excuse people who, like, may not be the best role player. I can excuse people who, do a bunch of things, but people who actively fight me as a GM when I'm trying to share the story with everyone, that's so annoying. It's the most annoying thing.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't want the spotlight when I point it at you, okay, like, I can accept that. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. If I'm trying to, like, if we've been focused on you for a while and then I'm trying to, like, shift it to someone else and you're grabbing it, like, I know I'm taking the metaphor, like, very literally, like, grabbing the spotlight and keeping it on yourself, that gets annoying to me. It gets annoying to the other players. Like, it's very frustrating. Been there, like, love some of those people who do it. Not going to name names. Emily. No. But especially it's the time I run into it the most is at conventions.
Yes.
Because people have that vibe of, like, the ticking clock. Like, I only have so much time to play this game. I want to get as much out of it as I can.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's literally like, just like, oh, for the heck, go, just let go. I'm pointing at someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a battle.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Mailbag number 2. We're flying through this tonight. It's good. I'm still, like, I got back from Gamma, and I, like, being an extroverted introvert, like, I'm still burned out. Like, it's been a week.
Yeah.
And I'm still just, like, exhausted from it, and just like, okay, I'm just ready to go and just, like, be in my cozy little blanket, and, like,
It sounds so nice.
it's so nice.
Yeah.
Like, cocooning is my favorite thing. My daughter started doing it too. I know this is gonna be the kid episode, sorry, but, like, she lives, like, my best life at all times. She's a very soft, fluffy blanket that she'll just, like, drape over herself and walk around the house like a queen with a train, and be like, "Mama, wrap it around me more." Okay.
We tuck my kid in every night, and she kicks off her blanket inevitably. She's just like, I don't need this. Ugh.
And then does she call you?
No.
Oh, my kid calls us. Well, she finally learned how to do it, like, pull it up herself. But
Yeah.
she would, like, 3 times a night, Mama, Mama Dada, Mama Dada, Mama Dada blanket, blanket. And she wouldn't do anything. She'd, like, we'd watch her on the little video monitor. She wouldn't even, like, try and reach down. She would just, Mama Dada blanket, blanket. And of course, like, we, like, well-trained, like, millennial
Yeah.
parents run in and, like, okay, here you go. Come here. And then finally we're like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
this is how you do this. We teach her, and then she'd be like, Mama, Dada blanket. And then she'd, like, wait, and we wouldn't come, and she'd be like, and you could just see her, like, kind of grumble and, like, reach down and pull it up perfectly herself. She could do it the whole time, and then just, like, roll over and just be like, "Ugh, abusive parents not coming in 3 times a night to pull my blanket up."
That she's gonna get therapy someday about that.
She is. She also has, like, the most fluffy blanket because she stole it from me. My husband bought it for me because I love, like, super soft furry blankets. Like, just like, oh. And then she took it. And now I'm not heartless enough to take it from her, but yeah. Anyway, this is what I'm going to get therapy about someday.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old stole my fluffy blanket. Okay, anyway. Mailbag number 2. Let's get back to, what we're here for. Ahoy, Captain Kimmy and the Happy Jacks crew. I'm writing in with a success story, specifically about player feedback. I heard the recent invitation for emails that aren't just questions, but also stories. So here's mine. Maybe I'll have another question by the time I'm done writing it out. Who knows? Once upon a time, a few months ago, I wrote, that's my favorite thing. Once upon a time, a few months ago, I wrote in asking about eliciting better player feedback, specifically in the vein of constructive criticism, negative feedback, what to improve on, etc. I explained that instead of just asking for general feedback, which wasn't yielding much, I started using a particular format: thorns, roses, and buds. But I still wasn't getting the kind of feedback I was looking for. IRC, there is some confusion about the format, i.e., I didn't include enough details about it, so let me clarify before moving on. 1. Roses. Things the players liked about the session. They help highlight and celebrate favorite moments, and help me know what to repeat. maybe similar to stars from Stars and Wishes. 2, thorns, things the players didn't like about the session and maybe impaired their enjoyment. So things that I didn't, things that they didn't like how I ran it, or things that other players did, or about the system / rules they didn't like, etc. Thorns are not those juicy, delicious, bad things that happen in game to make them dramatic and interesting and fun. 3, buds, things the players are looking forward to, i.e. things they should include. Maybe similar to wishes from Stars and Wishes? Yeah, that's very similar. Previously, I was getting good roses and buds, but players were not offering thorns. My hunch was that they had thorns, but were hesitant to give negative feedback. But at least this format was giving me something, and it normalized a structured exchange of feedback. Yes, very good. After I sent that email, one of the other members of our group had turned into the GM seat for a short campaign, and he continued with our new norm of doing thorns, roses, and buds at the end of the session. And oh man, did I have thorns! Now, this guy is an excellent GM. I've done a lot of fun games he's run in the past, but I really did not like the system. The game was Pokemon Tabletop United, which is a rather crunchy, fan-made Pokemon tabletop game, and it shares a lot of game design genes with D&D. It's an ambitious project. The system is supposed to combine the fun of the show and the build gamey parts of the video games and the flexibility of TRPGs. I can see what people like about it, especially my GM friend, but it's just not to my taste. Okay, side note, there is actually an official Pokemon tabletop role-playing game.
Really?
And it is the best-selling tabletop role-playing game of all time. Like, to this day. I learned this at Gamma, actually. Like, I think the company, they got I went to a seminar and they talked about it. I was super fascinated. They got a child psychologist to come help them design the game in a way that would make kids want to play the game and capture the thing about Pokemon that kids love. And they just sold a shit ton of it. I don't think they've ever I honestly, I kind of maybe knew it existed. I don't think I even knew it existed, but kids bought it like gangbusters. So I now have to track it down and get a copy because I'm going to have to look at that and just for a design thing. So yeah, wild. So I don't know anything about this particular hack of it or this fan-made thing, but the actual official Pokemon tabletop role-playing game is the best-selling one of all time. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Back to the email. But not to my taste. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to test out giving the kind of feedback I was hoping to get. Here's some hazily recalled and paraphrased thorns that I gave about the combat. 4 hours of combat was way too much for me. I stopped enjoying it after about 30 minutes. About a particular GM choice. I know that using the protect move was technically the right choice for the NPC to make that move in combat, but it just dragged it out and it didn't change the outcome. So I wish maybe you'd made a different choice. At our mid-campaign arc check-in, I know we've talked about maybe continuing this game. I'd love to keep exploring these characters and the story in another system, but I'm really not enjoying this one. And combat again. Look, man, I know you love tactical combat, but I don't enjoy needing 4 hours to resolve one combat between one NPC and my PC. Oof. I would hope that other people at the table would have something to do. I don't know. After 4 sessions, I thought I wasn't being heard, but in session 5, something changed. The GM drastically shifted his approach to the combat scenario design. He reduced the number of combatants and made interesting / engaging locations / maps. So combat became more than just whittling numbers. It still took a couple hours, which wasn't my favorite, but it was way better and I felt heard. I genuinely thought that I could not have fun with that system, but I was wrong. And he did a great job of using my feedback to make the game fun for me, and I let him know via the roses. After that campaign concluded, I hopped on the GM seat again. And just as I'd hoped, giving the kind of feedback I wanted to hear normalized it. Yes. And I started to actually hearing thorns from my players. And now I'm getting feedback about system things. Now I'm facilitating the game, like table management, decisions/development within the fiction and the game, etc. So far, they've led to significant changes and, I'd like to think, improvements. I also try to follow up about thorns in the following session, like letting my players know what changes I'm making based on what piece of feedback. I try to communicate an ethic of experimentation and that can always adjust if needed. This has probably been a 4-hour combat of an email, so I'm going to abruptly end it. Happy gaming, Gergmerg. P.S. Traditional P.S. P.P.S. Writing to you fine folks is the only time I actually enjoy email. Thanks for all you do.
Yay.
Yay. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think normalizing it is the key. Like, this is one of the reasons I know we've talked about before. Like, I love things like For the Queen that normalize using the X card. Because it's like the more it gets used, the less taboo it becomes.
Yeah.
And everyone was always nervous, especially if you're playing with a game with like your real friends sitting around a table. It's like nobody likes giving like, oh, I didn't like this, because they don't want to upset their friendships. They don't want to deal with the blowback. They don't want to risk the game ending or whatever. But I think like this, the feedback examples you gave are not personal.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like 4 hours of combat. This is a problem with the system. It's not, you're such a terrible GM. Gosh, it was so boring. Like, don't do that. That's a jerk move.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like hearing about this, like, as a former critic. It is so hard to take criticism that I think sometimes people really shy away from giving it. But like, criticism is the only way that we can like improve. And obviously there's a difference between, as you said, you suck, and I think this just isn't the right choice for what we're trying to do right now. Like, I hear 4-hour combat and I want to like run through the wall and leave an Emily-shaped hole.
Yeah.
But you know, some people really dig that. And it's like, a game like this is like a game is often like an attempt to find a middle ground that everyone can enjoy a little bit and then like build from there. And it sounds like this was a great way to sort of do that. And I've noticed that with Thorns and Roses, is how often people don't leave any thorns. They're just like, no, things are great. And I don't know. I think as a hobby, we have to sort of like get better at normalizing criticism that is not intended personally and is intended as like, this is just like going to be more fun for me.
Yeah. And I think as a society, like, we have a way of only sharing negative feedback when it's gotten to a point where we're ready to explode about it. Like, if you hate 4-hour combats and you sit through an entire campaign of 4-hour combats and you're almost at the end, and finally one day you're just like, I hate 4-hour combats, or like 8-hour combats, like some of the old 4E days. Like, gosh, those were hard. But like, and you just explode about it one day, and like, that's how you torpedo a group. Like, that's hard you know, and I think there's a lot of like conventions that like now that I'm kind of more on the side of like having tables and stuff at conventions, there's always like a chat or a Discord or a Facebook group for people who are like in an official capacity and always after, like, there's always somebody after every convention, Gamma or Strategicon, or when I used to do like cosplay conventions, someone always loses their shit and like, and they're like, this is supposed to be at a professional capacity, like after the event. And I get like it's exhausting, but they just like will like write this novel of every single like complaint they've ever had, and everyone's just like, well, that could have been handled better. Like, and it's not that people are against having constructive feedback. It's that if you wait until after the event and just lose your shit on everybody, or if you wait until after the campaign's done and just lose your shit on everybody, like, that's not helpful. And and it tends to get very personal. That's when you stop giving constructive feedback and you just start insulting people.
Yeah. Not to make gaming therapy again, but I mean, a good practice from therapy is that like your feelings are important and are valid, and like keeping them bottled up is rarely the way to go.
Yeah.
When you are starting to feel that frustration is the right time to share that frustration, because you're going to be able to talk about it like rationally, rather than, getting to the end and screaming at everyone in the Discord about how you wanted to play a bear and you had to play a horse.
Yeah. I mean, playing a horse is amazing. But but yeah, and again, RPGs are therapeutic, not therapy.
Yeah.
But also just being a good friend / person, like it's just be responsible with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that would be another add-on to the last email. Like,
Yeah.
allow yourself to be facilitated, but also be communicative
Yeah.
about like your needs and honest, but in a kind way.
Yeah, think about how you would want people to come to you if they had a problem with something you were doing at the table, and just treat them in that fashion.
Yeah.
The golden rule applies, I guess.
I know, right? Someone was talking. I think it was like the Daggerheart Discord that's been happening everywhere. Not a Discord, but like the talking about it. That's
I have
happened.
not heard about this.
The discourse. Oh, Daggerheart is the system. Alex and a couple other people in the Happy Jacks family kind of worked on it. It's Critical Role's new fantasy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. But like there's been a lot of discussion about it. But people were talking about like its length. It's 370 pages for
Okay.
a quick start.
Okay.
It's not the actual game yet. It's like the beta. So that's a lot of pages for a beta. I've never seen it. I haven't. No, that's not true. I've done betas. They're Cortex and stuff that are long. So, but a bunch of people were talking about like things that were stated in it that didn't need to be said. Like the gold. We should just all assume that everyone knows like the golden rule and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, I don't know. As someone who runs a podcast for people who have problems with gaming, it's amazing how many people don't know basic things like the golden rule. And actually, that's like, maybe don't assume that everyone knows some basic things like that, because I feel like maybe not. It's probably a good idea to explicitly state to like be nice.
And like I've noticed this being a driver in Southern California. I think that like the pandemic broke a lot of our brains by, being trapped inside for so long on how to like deal with the world around us. And especially I think more and more people are moving into physical in-person gaming and having to relearn the rules of like being in that space. And like that's when we all need to be really willing to give constructive criticism and even more importantly, like receive it and take it to heart. So, everyone's brains have been broken and we're trying to put them back together. And let's just have patience with each other.
Yeah. And they're going to go back together differently. Like, they're just going to. Like, I still like just with my own comfort levels with stuff, it's like, nope, this is still really different. Like, and it may not ever be like how it was before. And I don't know how much of that is the pandemic or having a baby during a pandemic or having a baby or like any combination of those things, or it's just really strange.
Yeah. The important thing is to be polite so you can end up with a different gender and a baby.
Yeah.
That's
because that's how you do it.
That's how it works.
Keep playing RPGs. All right. Thank you for joining us for season 33, episode 15 of the Happy Jacks podcast. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Please
Are you
support.
Irish? I'm not.
I think I am way, way, way back.
Okay.
But definitely more like English, Welsh.
Okay.
But who knows? But I've been in an Irish band for enough years. It's like
It kind of rubs off.
Yeah, everyone on St. Patrick's Day, everyone's Irish, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
It was funny. I went to lunch with Jason. We were just like walking down the street. Down here, there's a street that has a whole bunch of restaurants on it, and like it was like 12:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday, and I'm like, and I don't do shows. I don't do St. Patrick's Day shows anymore, so I keep forgetting it's St. Patrick's Day. Something that used to be a big staple of my year. When you're in an Irish band, like it's like a day you remember, and I just don't remember anymore. And we're walking in, I'm like, why does every restaurant have a bouncer out front? What's happening? Like, I'm like starting to like run. My brain is like, what is that? And then I realized they're all wearing like the Mardi Gras, but like all in green beads and stuff. And I'm like, oh, St. Patrick's Day. They're all preparing for the drunk people who are already starting to show up at 12:30 on the Sunday. I was like, I feel so old.
My wife and I went out for lunch with our kid, and everyone was wearing green. And my wife was like, "Why is everyone in green? I don't think it's a sports thing." And she was like, "Oh,
Oh yeah." Yeah, already they're like checking IDs at the bars, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, I'm already too tired for this. Okay. But still, I miss it a little bit every year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it used to be fun. Margaritas are green. It's fine. All right. Please support our indie designer of the month, Logan Timmons. You can find his games at breathingstories.itch.io. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their incredible ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. Thank you. We have a bunch of new Patreons. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. My name is Kimmy.
I'm Emily.
And today we're leaving you with a song called The Pub That We Call Home. And it is by the world famous Poxy Boggarts. So thank you very much. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, allow me to tell ye of a place dear to heart, of each sailor and soldier, both sloven and smart. Each space in that place is familiar and warm, where each traveler weary retreats from life's storm.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
Though married but not merry, bearing lowly life's load, and suffering the chafing of my long-winded road, entombed in the womb of this free house at Bath, her walls provide shelter from my wife's wicked wrath.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
In the hours when life sours and I'm weary and beat, to the hopping and copping I need to retreat. With a pale cup of ale and my good mate's concerns, I'm rested yet weary to the battle return.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
With the raging of aging in my last breath I crave, please pull up the floorboards and dig me a grave. As you rouse and carouse, pour an ale on the floor. If you listen with care, you may hear me cry more.
Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home. 'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in